Shalom, shalom to the family. Street baptism back with more knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that we believe comes directly from the Father through his son, Yeshua, Yahusha, or Yahushua and Mashiach. Whichever pronunciation one decides to use is all right according to the word of God, as long as you call on the Father in the name of his only begotten, and that's the truth according to his word. Forgive me. Much love to the family and the individuals trying to follow in the footsteps of the Messiah and live while he lived while he was here in truth and sincerity by way of humility. Street baptism is back. Praise the Creator. This here is going to be another video concerning Black or African American or diasporic history. And it's going to be entailed, of course, in a playlist, Black, African American, or diasporic history. Praise the Creator. Emphasis on the quotations surrounding Black and African American. With that being said, let's get right into it. It's been a little while since we've done a video concerning quote unquote Black or African American or diasporic history. So here we go. Today we're talking about, and we running through, or we're going to skim through, or it might be a heavy skim. Either way, we're running through the Oregon Black exclusion laws. Praise the Creator. And so actually, let me do this real quick. Let me do this. Forgive me, y'all. So here we are. We back. This is a map of the United States of America, or what they call the USA. As y'all can see right here. And most of these pictures, this red part right here on the West Coast, this is Oregon, the state of Oregon. Above it is Washington. Right below it is California on the west, or on the left, and Nevada on the right. Praise the Creator. And so this is what we're talking about. Oregon exclusion laws. The exclusion laws related to African Americans within this state. And here's a picture of Oregon itself. Like I said, Washington is above it. If y'all can see it, if I can get a better picture. Let me see. Let me see if this one is better. Yep, this one is a little bit better. Washington above it, as y'all can see, California below it, down there on the left-hand side, and Nevada on the right-hand side. Also to the east is Idaho. So we're talking about the exclusion laws related to this state right here. So let's read. Oregon Black exclusion laws. Racist law attempt of Oregon. A racist law attempt of Oregon. It says the Oregon Black exclusion laws were attempts to prevent Black people from settling within the borders of the settlement and eventual U.S. state of Oregon. That's interesting. The first such law took effect in 1844. Praise the Creator. This is about 6 years before the Civil War started. About 6 years. It says the first such law took effect in 1844. Forgive me, I said about 6 years. About 16, 20 years. Approximately. It says when the provisional government of Oregon voted to exclude Black settlers from Oregon's borders. Man, that's interesting. The law authorized a punishment for any Black settler remaining in the territory to be whipped with not less, this is a quote, not less than 20 nor more than 39 stripes. So it has to be in between 20 and 39 stripes. That's what they were saying. This was the punishment for any Black settler remaining in the territory. It says not less than 20 nor more than 39 stripes for every 6 months they remain. So every 6 months, if you ain't left, if you ain't got the means to go nowhere, if you don't know where else to go, if your family here, or if you got something here that's keeping you here, you're going to get whipped on every 6 months until you leave. That's what it's saying. And actually here we have a citation. J. Henry Brown, 1892, Brown's Political History of Oregon. Provisional Government, Portland. Willie B. Allen, and there's the rest of the information concerning the work that is from. It says additional laws aimed at African Americans. Additional laws aimed at African Americans entering Oregon were ratified in 1849 and 1857. The last of these laws was repealed in 1926. That means just about 100 years ago. These laws were repealed or taken away, finally put to rest after all the time that they were situated or that they were standing or ordained. The last of these laws was repealed in 1926. The laws Born of anti-slavery and anti-black beliefs, the laws which were born or came out of anti-slavery and anti-black beliefs were often justified as a reaction to fears of black people instigating Native American uprisings. So if y'all have ever heard of the book, what's the name of that book? Black Indians, by William Katz. I think that's the author's name. Forgive me, y'all, real quick. Forgive me, y'all. Forgive me. I had to go check that real quick. And so the book is written by William Loren Katz, published in 1986. This book speaks about the relationships between Native Americans, quote unquote, and so-called black or African Americans. So-called blacks or African Americans. And so this is what they're saying was an issue, but it really wasn't an issue. It was just an issue of exclusion, or excluding so-called black people. And here's another map of Oregon, or this is Southern Oregon, Nevada, California, with some other territory included, Arizona, the west of Colorado, and New Mexico, the west of New Mexico, some other territories. But this is a 1903 map of the Oregon territory. And so it says here, early white settlers in the Oregon country often held both anti-slavery and anti-black beliefs, and many came from states such as Missouri towards the East Coast, or what they call the Midwest, which has some version of exclusion laws. More citations. White settlers believed banning slavery would eliminate political controversy, but feared that settlements of free slaves would compete for power with white people. So white settlers believed banning slavery would eliminate political controversy. So they were trying to cut down on the controversy, or the controversy within politics and lawmaking in the country. But they feared that settlements of free slaves, meaning free slaves settling down and making residence, would compete for power with white people. So what they thought basically was the same way in Wilmington, North Carolina, that they wrongfully pushed those black people out of office, along with some what they would call off-white people, or individuals that were a part of the lesser white party at that time. If y'all haven't checked that video out that we did on the channel, check that video out concerning Wilmington, North Carolina. You can also find Vox, or Vox, VOX, on YouTube. They did a video concerning Wilmington, North Carolina, and I actually made reference to that video in the video I did on the channel. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Praise God. All of these different topics are important. Today we're talking about so-called black, or so-called African American, or so-called diasporic history. Praise God. History that's related to the children or the descendants of black people that came before, quote unquote African Americans that came before, or anybody that was a part of the diaspora throughout the earth in general, or what's called in the Bible or known as the four corners. Praise the Creator. So check that video out if you haven't. But it says, they feared settlements of free slaves would compete for power with white people, just like the White Declaration of Independence from Wilmington, North Carolina around 1898, 1899. They literally wrote something called, a document called the White Declaration of Independence. This is a real thing. Praise the Creator. And so this is what these people are concerned with too. These black people, they might end up, having more power than us eventually, in a country that we established for us. We can't have that. Okay, and so it says, in addition, they believed that allowing slavery could lead to the land in Oregon being taken over by large plantations, as in the southern states, and force them to compete with bonded labor. And so they didn't want to compete with other Caucasian people or Europeans in the territory that they had control over, or that they were living in. Even though we both European, it's going to be our industry versus yours. They didn't want that either. So it says, one early migrant wrote that Oregon pioneers meaning the first residents of Oregon, hated slavery, but a much larger number of them hated free Negroes worse even than slaves. Because at least if I'm a slave, you can keep tabs on me. But if I'm free, I can do what I want, to some degree, at least in this country. More citations. Praise the Creator. In 1843, the Provisional Government of Oregon, this is some wild stuff, y'all, but not too wild because we know who established this country and what they established it for. It was Western Europeans that established this country. These Western Europeans sought for freedom from the government and the political rule over in Western Europe. So it had nothing to do with us. They didn't bring us over here to be free with them. But let's keep going. In 1843, the Provisional Government of Oregon, meaning the leadership of Oregon, established a set of organic laws, including a ban on slavery. There shall be neither, this is a quotation, there shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory, otherwise they end the punishment of crimes whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. And so this is basically a runoff of the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment from the Constitution. Let's read it again. There shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory, otherwise, meaning unless or only in the case of, it says, then in the punishment of crimes, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. In other words, no slavery here unless we say so, according to whatever crime is committed by the Negro or the nigger. That's basically what the 13th Amendment says in so many quote unquote confusing words, or seemingly confusing words. Okay, it says enforcement of the law was left unclear. After a vote on June 26, 1844, the first black exclusion law reiterated or spake again a ban on all slavery in Oregon territory, and it forced black and mulatto, meaning quote unquote mixed settlers, to leave Oregon territory within 3 years, 2 years for men, which means 3 for women and children, probably. That's probably what that means. Makes sense. It says 2 years for men or be whipped no more than 39 times. That section was amended in December 1844 to permit or to allow a free slave to be resold on the condition that the slave owner agreed to remove them from the territory at the end of the contract, which was held within the provisional government, or with the provisional government. So they're basically making these rules to help themselves out in a sneaky manner as it pertains to the economy and making funds or finances and staying in power. This is what we read it. It says, in effect, that reestablished slavery on a temporary basis for 3 years. As it just stated, they allowed this as long as the slave owner agreed to remove them from the territory at the end of the contract. And so it says, the law was repealed in 1845 without any such punishment ever being carried out. And so let me do this real quick, because we've seen these words. Let me just look up ratify and repeal. Let's go back up here. I'm getting this from the Edom Online Dictionary by Douglas R. Harper from the year 2000. If y'all haven't checked out the videos we've done on the channel concerning that source or that resource, or the resources that make up that resource, check that or those videos out. Here we go with ratify. From the mid 14th century or 1300s, ratifying. To confirm, to approve, to sanction, or to allow, to validate by formal act of approval, ultimately from a Latin word, ratus, meaning fixed by calculation, determined, approved, certain, sure, valid. Ultimately from the Proto-Indo-European root re, which means to reason, plus facere or day. Facere going back to day, meaning to put. To put again, that's what it means. And so it says right here, forgive me y'all, let me find it. The law authorized. Then we read the word ratify here. Forgive me, y'all. I thought we read the word ratify. I might be wrong. I was gonna look up repeal too, though. Okay. Well, we looked that up. I can't find it, and I'm not gonna skim too long to try to find it. But I'm gonna look up repeal, because it says here the last of these laws was repealed. Praise the Creator. It says, oh yeah, there's ratify right there. Additional laws aimed at African Americans entering Oregon were ratified or allowed or formally put into act in 1849 and 1857. The last of these laws was repealed in 1926. And I said repeal or repel, just like ant repellent, because this word is related. Repeal from the late 14th century or the late 1300s. Repelling, to revoke, to rescind, to annul, to withdraw, meaning to take away. Ratify means to put into act or approval formally, and repeal means to take away or to push away, like you would use ant repellent. The point is to get ants away. Praise the Creator. And so we just want to make sure we stand on top of the definitions of these words as we aim to do here at Street Baptism. Okay, back to this. It says, in effect, that reestablished slavery on a temporary basis for 3 years. The law was repealed in 1845 without any such punishment ever being carried out. A lot of people have never heard of this. How many black people y'all think living in Oregon? Or how many so-called African Americans or descendants of African Americans living in Oregon or the state of Oregon that have never heard this history? It's outrageous. Outlandish. Praise the Creator. Let's keep going. On September 21st, 1849, the Oregon Territory established its second exclusion law. So the first exclusion law was the one that was established in 1844. The second exclusion law, it says it declared or declaring a ban on any Negro or mulatto to enter into or reside. So now you can't even enter into the land or reside by 1849. Not only do you have to go by 1844, but at 1849 you can't even come here. It's crazy. All right. Declaring a ban on any Negro or mulatto to enter into or reside in Oregon unless already established there. So no new people. That's a fact. We don't want no new niggas. That's what they're saying. At least 4 black people were punished under this law, including Jacob Vanderpool, a sailor, and 3 others who were eventually permitted to stay. Citation there. Let's keep going. An 1850 census showed fewer than 50 black residents in the state of Oregon. Come on, y'all. 50, less than 50, including a mixed race man from Pennsylvania, George Bush. This was his name. This is not the president, George Bush, who was forced to move north of the Columbia River after the first exclusion law was passed. So in 1844, he already had to move north. Okay. And so this law here affected him as well as other people. George Washington, another unrelated free man, did that. This is not George Washington, the president of the United States. Just saying, y'all. Names are common, especially certain specific names, more common than others. Household names, as they would be called. George Washington, another unrelated free man, was the founder of Centralia, Washington. So this man here, he founded, it looks like a city or a small town in the state of Washington, which is north of Oregon. On April 16th, 1852, Robin Holmes, a black slave of Nathaniel Ford, or Nathan Ford, brought a case to the territorial Supreme Court. So this black man or this black slave brought a case at 1852 to the territorial Supreme Court, charging that he and his family were being held by Ford illegally. Holmes versus Ford was heard by 4 judges, culminating or ending in or concluding in Judge George Henry Williams in June 1853, ruling that slavery was illegal in Oregon. Descendants of Holmes have since stated that Ford had encouraged the lawsuit as a means to bring an end to slavery in the state. On November 7th, 1857, Oregon's delegates to the State Constitutional Convention submitted proposals to legalize slavery and to ban black people from the state. So the Oregon's delegates, meaning lawmakers or individuals who delve into politics, they submitted proposals to legalize slavery and to ban black people from the state, including a ban on signing contracts or owning land. Can't do that. The slavery amendment failed, but the exclusion law was passed. Oregon was the only state admitted to the Union with such an exclusion law. What's the Union? The American Civil War cited. The Union, colloquially known as the North, refers to the United States when 11 southern slave states seceded to form the Confederate States, and this is where a Confederate flag comes from, Confederate States of America, CSA, also known as the Confederacy or South during the American Civil War. This is what the Union is speaking of here. Oregon was the only state admitted to the Union with such an exclusion law. There are no records that this law was enforced, and the legislature voted down a proposed 1865 law that would authorize sheriffs to deport black residents in their counties. Okay, and so here's more on the 1844 exclusion law. Okay, text of the 1844 law and amendments. Y'all can read this here. It says, though the official text of the original law has been lost, it was reprinted in several sources. At the time, the law was described contained the law as described contained 8 sections, and 2 amendments were added in December 1844. The Oregon exclusion law prohibited free black men, stopped free black men and women in the territory, though jurisdiction for the law was limited to the region south of the Columbia River. Section 1, that slavery and involuntary servitude should be forever prohibited in Oregon. Section 2, that in all cases where slaves shall have been or shall hereafter be brought into Oregon, the owners of such slaves respectively shall have the term of 3 years, meaning until 1847 or early 48, from the intro of such slaves to remove them out of the country. Section 3, that if such owners of slaves shall neglect or refuse to remove such slaves from the country within the time specified in the preceding section, such slaves shall be free. And y'all, we can keep going with this. We just read the gist of this up there. This is the amendment from December. Here's the 1849 law. And I just want to say this too. There were many, as we would say from our perspective, as it pertains to human rights, unlawful acts brought forth or ordained or established in this country. But as far as a state or a broadened territory, nothing like what Oregon has here. This is why this is important that we're looking up. We talked about Seneca Village, and we speak about that. We talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street. We speak about that. We talk about Wilmington, North Carolina. We talk about many of the black cities and towns that were flooded purposely or burnt down purposely, and many other things that black people or so-called African Americans have had to go through in this country. But never have we had to deal with full exclusion from a whole state, especially on the West Coast. This makes it more significant because we're not talking about the South. That would make more sense because the Great Migration started from the South, and this is how black people, for the most part, got everywhere else in this country where they are today, or where they descended, where they can find their descendants today back from that time. But on the West Coast, it's really kind of unseemly, which really means that they went out their way to exclude black people from the whole state of Oregon, or the territory of Oregon, which was larger than the state of Oregon today. Keep that in mind too. Here we go, the 1849 law. In September 1849, the legislature or the lawmakers passed another exclusion law with a preamble arguing that, quote, it would be highly dangerous to allow free Negroes and mulattoes to reside in the territory or to intermix with the Indians, instilling or implementing or placing in their minds feelings of hostility against the white race. Jesus. The 1849 law ordered any black people entering the territory to leave within 40 days. So if you got here and we just implemented this law, you got a month and 10 days approximately to go. We don't want you here. On the West Coast, y'all, this is outrageous. All right. The family of Abner Hunt Francis were ordered out of the state within 40 days, but were allowed to stay after the petition was signed by 225 citizens. The petition formed the basis of a failed coalition to amend the exclusion law to allow for good behavior bonds by black settlers. This is like good behavior in prison. Man, Jesus Christ. It's like getting parole. Okay. Y'all, this is outlandish. The Francis family moved to Canada in 1861. A petition was also used in 1854 to prevent the deportation of Morris Thomas and Jane Snowden. Oregon's congressional delegate Samuel Thurston, while seeking to limit federal land grants to white people, described the law to Congress. The Negroes associate with the Indians and intermarry, and if their free ingress is encouraged or allowed, if we allow this intermingling to continue, there will be a relationship, or there would a relationship spring up between them and the different tribes, and a mixed race would ensue inimical to the whites. Now, this is somewhat of what's spoken about in the book Black Indians by William Loren Katz. Now, a lot of people have only used that book, just like Babylon and Timbuktu, just like Lost Tribes and Promised Land, and just like many other books that people use or buy, or they seem to be getting excerpts from. People haven't really read that book, Black Indians, as well as other books that I just named, for example, to know that it's stuff like this in that book as well. So not only on the East Coast, the whole East Coast and in parts of the Midwest and the South, but also on the West Coast. They were scared of the Indians and the so-called African Americans or the black people intermingling because it would be, or they felt that it would prove detrimental to their growth and development and what they plan for themselves in this country. This is what this is saying. And it's the same thing the White Declaration of Independence said, excluding the Indians. It says that the Indians being led on by the Negro who is better acquainted with the customs, language, and manners of the whites than the Indian, these savages would be or will become much more formidable than they otherwise would. Meaning the Indians would get worse by learning more of our customs and how we move and how we talk and how we think and how we do things. Then the slaves or the black people know more about this than the Indians. So if they add that knowledge and information to the Indians, it would just make the Indians worse. That's what this is saying. That's why it says these savages will become more formidable. That means they will have a greater formation or they will become stronger. It says than they otherwise would, and long and bloody wars will be the fruits of the commingling of the races. And they already saw this taking place in several instances on the East Coast and the South and in the parts of the Midwest. So they said, we're not going to have it over here. The law was repealed in 1854. So this was allowed for 5 years, 6 years. The 1857 law. Here's the title page of the Oregon State Constitution in 1857. In 1857, after Oregon voters had voted for statehood, this is several years before the Civil War began and ended. This is about 4 or 5 years before Lincoln, quote unquote, freed the slaves or the Emancipation Proclamation. We got to keep up with our history in chronological time. Praise the Creator. Or in sequence. Okay, in 1857, after Oregon voters had voted for statehood, they subsequently or afterwards called for a constitutional convention. The emergent constitution, and so now this is no longer a territory. Since they have a state constitution now, this is when they became a state in 1857. The emergent constitution contained 185 sections, 172 of which were taken from various other state constitutions. So these state constitutions, many of them have more parallels than not. It says with the additions primarily being racial exclusion or finance related. The document enshrined an exclusion law into Section 35 of the Bill of Rights with the Oregon State Constitution. The article read as follows. No free Negro or mulatto not residing in the state at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall come reside or be within this state or hold any real estate or make any contracts or maintain any suit therein. And the legislative assembly or the lawmaking assembly shall provide by penal laws or punishment laws for the removal by public officers of all such Negroes and mulattoes, and for their effectual exclusion from the state, and for the punishment of persons who shall bring them into the state, or employ and harbor them, or hold them, or hide them. Y'all. John McBride, later a state senator, described the amendment. It was largely an expression against any mingling of the white with any of the other races. This is the same thing the White Declaration of Independence from 1898-99 out of Wilmington, North Carolina. This is what that said. The same thing. They want to disenfranchise the so-called black or African American people and their descendants. We can see this in a broad sense and in a specific sense. This is the point of black, quote unquote, African American, quote unquote, diasporic history. Praise the Creator. Let's keep going. Actually, let me do this real quick. Forgive me, y'all. Here we go. It was largely an expression against any mingling of the white with any of the other races, and upon a theory that as we had yet no considerable representation of other races in our midst, we should do nothing to encourage their introduction. They weren't already here. Let's not add problems to our state. We were building a new state on virgin ground. Its people believed it should encourage only the best elements to come to us and discourage others. I also want to say the FHA, or the Federal Housing Administration, this means the basis of all real estate in the country from the 20th century or the 1900s. That means not too long ago. They also said the same thing as it pertained to real estate throughout the whole country. They said in the FHA document in the original real estate document that they had, the informative document that they put out to the public and gave to the government and all that, what they said was it would be best if whites didn't mix with blacks. And this is how we would better uphold the state of this territory. When you talk about Levittown, or when you talk about the first suburbs in the, look up Levittown, by the way, we're going to talk about Levittown too. When you look up the first suburbs in the U.S., this is how they said that these suburbs would last longer and do better and grow and develop at a greater rate, because it will only be white people there and no mixing. That's what it said, literally. And we'll talk about that and go into that and look at where it's at and where we can find it at when we talk about Levittown and the FHA. God willing, that'll be soon. Okay. It says, people believe it should encourage only the best elements to come to us and discourage others. Forgive me, y'all. The question of slavery itself was put to a popular vote, with the public voting against slavery by a vote of 7,727 to 2,645, but in favor of racial exclusion policies by a vote of 8,640 to 1,081. The final constitution barred or held against Negroes, mulattoes, and Chinamen from voting or owning land in the state. And so Chinamen or Filipinos, they were a part of this exclusion too. But the exclusion was mainly for black. See, these laws that were established in this country pertaining to inclusion and exclusion in the 1800s and the early 1900s, did they have anything to do with Native Americans? Yes. Did they have anything to do with Hispanics? Yes. Did they have anything to do with Filipinos and Asians? Yes. But they were mainly regarding black people, so-called black people, because we were the slaves. We were the main people and still are the main people that these people in this state and the people in this country in general were trying to figure out what to do with. Like, what do we do with these people? We see a migrant crisis today, but that's because Mexico is connected directly to the U.S. And the U.S., as they call it themselves, they took much territory from Mexico. California and Nevada and New Mexico was a part of Mexico. This is a fact. This is why New Mexico is called New Mexico in the first place. This is why when you go to California, you go to LA, and you go to the Bay Area, you see a lot of Hispanics. That's a fact. You see a whole lot, especially in Los Angeles. But here we go. And so now we see the repeal. Oregon's racially discriminatory state constitutional amendment, Section 35, was legally invalidated after the Civil War by the ratification of the 14th Amendment to the Federal Constitution of 1868. So this is more history. This is talking about the repeal. Here's the legacy, and we'll end with this. See, this is also related to a sundown town. From 1850 to 1860, Oregon saw its black population increase by just 75 in 10 years, compared to an increase of 4,000 in neighboring California, because California didn't have any exclusion laws like that. This is a major disband or separation, praise the Creator, between people coming into California and people allowed to come into Oregon. Oregon's black exclusion laws have been linked to a below average black population 2% into the present day to right now, 2% in Oregon. Okay, have been linked to a below average black population, 2% into the present day. Historian Cheryl Brooks has argued that Oregon's small black population has made it difficult for Oregonians to recognize racial discrimination problems in the state, because, as I said before earlier in the video, how many black people in Oregon, but how many people in Oregon in general have heard this history, have knowledge of it, and have an understanding of how it plays into politics and racial discrimination today. And so let me do this real quick. Forgive me, y'all. And so this is a video I saw some years ago related to Oregon exclusion laws. This sister right here, in fact, I believe this video and that video right there with the thumbnail, it's the same sister. Uploaded November 9th, 2017. Have you ever wondered why the black population of Oregon is so small? Oregon has a history not only of black exclusion and discrimination, but also of a vibrant black culture that helps sustain many communities throughout the state in the midst of these black exclusion laws. A history that is not taught in schools. Author and educator Walida Amarisha will lead participants through an interactive timeline of Black history in Oregon that speaks to the history of race, identity, and power in this state and the nation. And so this is one video here. Why aren't there more Black people in Oregon? A hidden history presented by Walida Amarisha. And here's another video. This is the same sister right here. Let me push up real quick. Yep, this is the same sister right here. And so here's two sources, two videos. One from Diversity Empowered, and the rest of the name, and one from Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art from 10 years ago. This one is from 7 years ago. She's also written a book pertaining to this, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, real quick. Forgive me, y'all. So I thought this sister wrote a book related to this topic specifically, and she has a couple books, and she might have entailed or implemented. I'm pretty sure she implemented some of this information concerning the Oregon Black exclusion laws in these books, either one or two of them. I haven't read these books. You know, we don't purport to read stuff here that we haven't read, or we don't purport to know stuff that we don't know here at Street Baptism. With that being said, though, much information concerning the Black exclusion laws of Oregon is out here, and we need to do a better job as it pertains to our own history. You know, we talk a lot about Black people and how they doing us dirty, but we still talk about the same stuff, barely, that they taught us in school. Like I said, Black Wall Street, Seneca Village. People don't even really talk about Seneca Village, but you know, we talk about slavery and slave ships and the South and, you know, other things that are familiar to the Black population in general. It's about 45 million documented African Americans in this country. So, you know, we need to do a better job with this history. Let's look into things that we haven't talked about. Let's get the precise facts on that so we can do a better job sourcing this information, citing this information, and understanding and teaching our children how that plays into the world or the country that we live in today. Praise the Creator. You know, with that being said, the Oregon Black exclusion laws was a big and a heavy part of the history of this country. You know, check this information out. We got to get to it. We got to do a better job. With that being said, much love to the family. Shalom, shalom. Street Baptism out.